Hello people, my name is Rage, and welcome to something that I love to do, and it is my next Carnament review. Carnament! I combined our Grand Tournament cards into one word. They are the Carnaments! That sounds kind of cool, actually. I really like that. So I'm going to have a look at all the released cards since my first one of these, and some of them will be new to me, some of them I already know about, and we'll go over them, see what's good, see what's terrible, and so the first new card we're going to be looking at is actually a card that introduces a brand new mechanic to the game, and a lot of these were revealed recently, and they're pretty damn good on the most part, and it's also a very neat mechanic. So, first up then, the 1-mana Gadgetzan Jouster, and the battle cry, reveal a minion in each deck if yours costs more, gain +1/+1. Now remember this, the effect of reveal a minion in each deck if yours costs more, a thing happens, is becoming apparently a prevalent theme, like an actual joust that's going on. I'm not sure why they didn't just call it a keyword joust. So for example, the card reads battle cry, joust, gain 1/1, but I guess they didn't want to make it too complicated or something. Either way, a 1-mana card that is a potential to be a 2/3 is always pretty good. Zombie Chow's good, and it's got a massive downside. Granted, if you lose, 1/2 is terrible, but it's not the end of the world terrible, because it's turn 1, and what it does do either way is give you valuable information. You play this on turn 1 against a Warlock, it pretty much tells you what deck he's playing, and you know what you should do with the rest of the cards that you draw, whether to save removal or burn it early. And that's quite important. So overall, if its battle cry goes off, a fantastic solid card. If not, kinda sucks, but still has potential uses. A really nice little 1-drop, honestly, and who doesn't like a goblin in armor? Alright, so next up, the 2-drop. We have the Flame Juggler. Now, this guy is interesting. It's arguable that 3/2 is better than 2/3 in the aggressiveness of the meta at the moment, though Grand Tournament does seem to be pushing for a slower controllier meta, so 2/3 might become the better standard. The thing with this card is it is a word away from being ridiculously good. If that said deal 1 damage to a random enemy minion, it would be wonderful. Your opponent opens up with a Leper Gnome, your turn 2 is a Flame Juggler, it kills it, you've got board control, you've slowed him right down, but the fact it can hit face, well, it puts this card into kind of mediocrity. I can't really think of a situation where you play Flame Juggler maybe over a Knife Juggler. I mean, granted, if your opponent has lots of 1-health minions, you're likely to get a kill, but that's not going to be on turn 2. I just don't. It would take a very specific meta shift in order to make Flame Juggler any good. As it is right now, I think it had so much potential, but I think it just falls short, and I think it's just kind of And that's a shame, because I do actually kind of like the artwork, and I like the Flame Juggler. It'd probably be a cool effect, and I would have liked to be able to play it more, but I don't see it doing that well. Although, if the card we're about to talk about becomes popular, who knows? Argent Horse Rider. This card, on the surface, is like 2/1 for 3 mana, even if it's got Charge of Divine Shield, really? And it's actually fantastic, is this card. A really, really solid common drop. It really is. Your opponent, aggro player, turn 2, Knife Juggler. You respond with Argent Horse Rider, kill the Knife Juggler. You've still got a 2/1, still needs dealing with. It will slow aggro right down. Now, the real benefit of this card, unlike most anti-aggro cards, is that you can't just whack it in an aggro deck, because a lot of the time, powerful early drops just end up in aggro instead of as anti-aggro. Whereas this, it's too slow and inherently weak stat-wise for you to put in something like Face Hunter, or hell, even something like Zoo. Despite Zoo not being that aggro, it's a much more control-based deck, ironically. But this card is very, very effective. You can also buff it for a charge combo later on, though that probably won't be the biggest use for it. And it's just good. It's just solid. You can really punch a hole in the onslaught of a very fast, spammy minion deck by having 2 of these in. It may just be a tech card, a choice that you make if the meta basically stays kind of how it is now, but it's just very good. It's neat, it's a mini to Northrend, and that's not bad at all. Next up is Silent Knight. Stealth and Divine Shield, 3 mana 2/2. Now, Stealth and Divine Shield is not something we've seen before on a card, and unfortunately, it's not enough to make this card that good. Granted, it is a free drop that you are guaranteeing is staying alive until you use it, basically, because it would take a lot of investment to kill this before you reveal it from stealth. 2 Lightning Storms, for example, which is a lot of investment for 1 free drop. And it's good in the sense that you can play it, you can buff it loads and eventually smack with it. But is that really better than playing Shade of Naxxramas for that purpose? All Shade of Naxxramas has to do is survive basically a turn against most classes, and then it's basically untouchable until you reveal it from stealth. So what's the real advantage of Silent Knight? Not that much. I mean, it does have potential. It is a common, so people will have access to it easier. I think this is really a card that gives more free-to-play players a nicer, cooler option for a sort of sleeper, sudden buff power shot than the epic that is Shade of Naxxramas. Granted, it's from, of course, an adventure, but you know what I'm saying. I don't know. I feel like this could get away with being a 2/3. And probably, even then, that probably won't be that good, so I don't really know. It's unique, but I don't know if it's good enough to actually see play, because you might as well just use Shade when you would use Silent Knight, in my opinion. Next up, then, we have, okay, this one is new. Tournament Medic. Inspire, restore 2 health to your hero, and a 1/8. That's a ridiculous stat distribution, more than Mogushan Warden. I don't know about this one. I feel like that's a lot of health to go through. If your opponent is, say, a face hunter with lots of 1 drops, this card obviously 1 health drops. This card obviously trades brilliantly, but at the same time, it's just not that impactful for 1 damage. Hell, if this was a 2/8, I still don't think it would be that good, because it just doesn't kill things. I mean, even at a 2/8, a Shredder kills it and still has a 2-drop, and then the restore 2 health. Is it really worth using your hero power to restore 2 health instead of using that mana on a card to continue to slow down aggro? Maybe this actually might see play in controlliness over an anti-aggro card, just to keep yourself up, keep the sustain going, make your opponent waste removal on its bulky 8 health instead of your later threats. I feel like there is potential with this card. I initially want to write it off as terrible, but I actually think there is some cool stuff you could do with this. Granted, you've got inner fire shenanigans and combos and buffs, but you can't look at ridiculous best case scenarios. I think this, you play it on turn 4, next turn, I mean, do you want a hero power for 2 health and a free drop over playing a Sludge Belcher? That's the kind of deal. I think this card very much is going to be either terrible or somehow the core of a ridiculously strong deck. I have a feeling it might go that way. I don't know why, I just kind of have that feeling. On the face of it, though, it's a very average to poor card, and I just think it needs at least 2/8 to be worth it. At least. Next up, then, Clockwork Knight. 5 for 5/5 mech. Give a mech 1/1. I mean, there's not much to say. It's solid, it's good, it's fine. Turn 3, you play a mech, spider tank, harvest golem. Not as much anymore, neither of those see that much play, so pretty terrible example self. Turn 4, then, you've got Shredder, you've got Mechanical Yeti. Turn 5, you now have a solid turn 5 mech, it gives them 1/1. Brilliant. I mean, it's fine, it strengthens mech decks, it's a good card, there's not much to say about it. It will be probably played in things like Mech Mage, which has fallen off a little bit, but any other resurging mech deck that comes with this expansion will almost certainly see at least 1 Clockwork Knight, because it's just very nice. I mean, if your Shredder survives turn 4, you have a 5/4 and a 5/5 sat there on your board on turn 5. That's not horrible, it's really not. It's just a good, solid card. Alrighty, it looks like Muckler the Giant Ape is sending a representative to the tournament. We got Muckler's Champion, Inspire if you're the minions, +1/+1. technically speaking, every time you hero power, give everything on your board 1/1. That's pretty good. However, 4/3 for 5 is just awful. Absolutely awful. 3/4 would have been a lot better. And the thing is, this ain't gonna survive a turn. It's got 3 health. Anything, a light breeze is gonna kill this on turn 5. I just don't see it happening, and it's competing with other 5-drops, and the 5-drop slot is just saturated with good, solid cards. So while the effect, objectively, is mega powerful, I will be astounded if this sees any actual decent competitive play. I mean, I'd kind of like it too, because it's a monkey riding a hippopotamus, but at the same time, I just don't think it is. It's too weak, and the effect's not ridiculously bonkers enough to make people try and make it work, so there you go. And then we got the injured Cavaldier. Cavaldier, is it a silent K, a Valdier? That's probably right. It's basically a mini injured Blade Master, a 2/1 for 1 mana that has the potential to be healed up to a 2/4. This is okay in Priest, because you could heal it on turn 2, so I guess if your turn 1 is injured Calvier, coin, say, a Squire, you hero power to heal it, you buff your Squire up. In situations like that, it's better than just playing a turn 2, 2/3. I mean, in Shaman, you could Ancestral Spirit to have a turn 1, 2/4 taunt, which is pretty good against aggro. Circle of Healing it on Priest. I think Blade Master's better because it comes later at a time when you can utilize it more. But also, in certain situations like I mentioned, this card's honestly not bad. I mean, 2/4 for 1's obviously ridiculous, despite it injuring itself. So, I don't know. This is one of these cards that's going to be experimented with, I feel, and has the potential to be a decent early game anti-aggro, because the aggro decks aren't going to be healing it up. So for them, it's just a 1 mana 2/1. So, I kind of do like it. Alright then, next up we have the Argent Watchman. God, this card is bad. I mean, it is so bad. It is really, really bad. You play this on turn 2, and on turn 3, you do not want to hero power and then have 1 mana to spare just so your 2 damage creature can attack. You might as well just play Ancient Watcher for a 4/5 and then taunt it with a card on turn 3. Overplaying this, it's just not that good. It's really not. I'm just not a fan of this. I just don't think it's strong enough stats for such a ridiculous drawback. Maybe if it had taunt by itself, that would probably be a little bit overpowered though. I don't know. It just doesn't seem strong enough. Why would you want to play this and then hero power over just a solid 2-drop then a solid 3-drop? I can't think that you would. Especially against aggro, which this is designed to stop, because you ain't going to be using this against control that are playing much more valuable creatures. So no, it's not a good card. I just don't think that is a good card at all. Next up, Colosseum Manager. Inspire, return this minion to your hand. Okay, so 3 mana 2/5, okay stats for the mana cost, particularly good. I mean, a 3/4 would be better, but that's fine. It's basically a heal to hero power and then play it again, but you want to pay 5 mana to heal your 2/5? Not really. I mean, in very stretched out arena games where this can trade, come back, replay, trade, and repeat when you're top decking, maybe it's good. But I can't see this having much play in Constructed at all. I mean, it doesn't just... Unless you have a minion that does a really powerful effect when you play another minion. But even then, you just play other minions. You don't need to keep bouncing back Colosseum Manager. I mean, there might be other cards revealed in the set, and obviously everything I'm talking about is subject to no other cards changing how it would synergize being released later on, but I don't know. It's better than Argent Watchman, but it's not that much better. It's still... It's okay, because at least you can get a lot of trades out of it before using your hero power if you don't want a hero power on turn 4 and turn 5, which a lot of the time you don't, because there's valuable drops to play there. So, I mean, it's good stats for free. Against aggro, it's fine. maybe I'm being a little bit harsh to it. Maybe it could see some play, but there's better free drops. I mean, there's a lot of better free drops, as we're going to find out. So we shall see. Alright, our next jousting minion then, the Armored Warhorse, a 4-mana 5/3 beast with potential charge. A 5/3 for 4 with charge. A better Rocketeer for 1 less mana if it wins the joust. Now, the thing is, you may be thinking, oh my god, Face Hunter, kill me now. But Face Hunter doesn't play any high-cost minions, and against a control deck, if they're up against it, which is when they would like this card, they're not going to win this joust. They are not going to get charge on this card, so that's not really where it's going to be used. Where it is going to be used is in something like perhaps Combo Shaman, with lots of high mana drops in. It gets charge, you got your Rockbiters, your Wind Fury, you can pump this up to 11 damage, charge for 22. I mean, that would be quite amusing. If it permanently had charge, a 4-mana 5/3 charge is insane and would be ridiculous. So I think this card will see a lot of experimental play and potentially will spawn some combo-y decks around it. Hey, it might even promote a more mid to late game Hunter, which is really quite nice because they get the beast synergy, they get the charge versatility. Hell, you could play this and then you could give it Bestial Wrath, you know, that card that's a thing, put it to a 7 that's immune, trade with something massive, and you still have a 5/3 on the board. That's not bad, honestly. I kind of want to experiment with that now that I think about it. So I kind of like this card. I do. Alright then, we have another Joust card, then the Master Jouster. Shockingly, I know, right? It jousts. A 6-mana 5/6, and if you win the Joust, Taunt and Divine Shield. So it's a Sun Fury Protector with +1/+1 if it wins, and if not, a 6-mana 5/6 isn't horrible. It really isn't. So this card's not bad. I mean, the stats for a 6-mana card should be 6/7, so it pays 1/1 to have this, but that's not huge. And if it does get Taunt and Divine Shield, this dude is hard to get by. So in an expensive control deck, this might just see a lot of play as a very difficult to get round Taunt. I think Silence is going to be very prevalent in Grand Tournament. I really do. There's not much to say about this card. It's fine if you don't get the Battle Cry, and if you do, it's really good, and 6 mana isn't that competitive of a spot, so it has room to be put into decks, so I do like that. Now we'll go to Epic, and by the way guys, a lot of you were like, why are you talking as if everyone has every card? Because obviously that's how I have to evaluate a card. I have to include every card in the game and how it would work with it. It's not some just, like, insult crusade against those of you that don't have a big collection. There's nothing wrong with not having a big collection, but it would be very remiss of me not to talk about a card as if the person wanting to use it had every card at their disposal and go over the potential that it has. So I just want you to know that. So the new Epic that's been revealed then, Master of Ceremonies. I like this card, a 4/2, and if you have a spell power minion, it gains +2/+2, so ideally a 6/4 on turn 3, which is pretty nice stats. Now granted, 4 health isn't brilliant because True Silver, Death's Bite comes out on turn 4. There's a lot of ways to deal 4 damage. So then again, if your opponent is weaponing this away and they have to hit themselves for 6, that's not a bad deal either. So the question is then, is there any decent spell power minions to play on turn 2? You basically have Thalnos and Kobold, and neither of which you really want to play on turn 2, because they're not that good by themselves. That kind of throws a spanner in the wench of Master... a spanner in the wench! That sounds like a really weird pirate expression. That throws a spanner in the works for Master of Ceremonies. What is neat is that Shaman rolling a spell power totem on turn 2 and then playing this is great, but you'd rather play the Tuskar Totemic over this, so it's not brilliant, especially as you have to draw this by turn 3, roll a 1 in 4 spell power totem on turn 2, and have it survive to turn 3. It's a big setup for not a massive amount of payoff. So while I really like this card, unless some really solid 2-mana spell power minions get revealed later on, I have a feeling it will sadly not see much play, but I am generally a big fan of this design, encouraging spell power a little bit more, and I'm definitely going to experiment it with a Shaman deck, that is for sure. Okay, the other new Epic then, the Crowd Favorite. Whenever you play a card with Battlecry, gain +1/+1, a slightly bigger, more specific questing adventurer, 4/4/4 force kind of okay. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's missing a health compared to the Vanilla Yeti. It's just okay. I mean, the dude looks like he's a right prick, but apart from that, it's just an averagely okay card. I mean, on turn 4 you play this, on turn 5 you play an Azure Drake, you've now got a 5/5, the 4/4 you've drawn. That's not bad, it's okay, but it's nothing crazy. Would you rather have that over a Shredder? I don't know. I mean, it's probably going to die to your opponent's Shredder anyway before it gets buffed up. I think it's just alright, it's potential, it's certainly not terrible, but I don't think it's going to cause much stirring of the water. I really don't. Legendaries then! Iris Darkbane and Fiola Lightbane. We'll look about them both at the same time because they are very, very similar. They are the twin Valkyries, a boss fight from WoW. And whenever you target this minion with a spell, deal 3 damage to a random enemy. That's pretty solid. First and foremost, 3 mana free 4s are great. Good stats, fine, brilliant. They're worth playing just for the stats. Then, say you're a priest, you Power Word Shield this on turn 4, hit something for free, you've now got a free 6 rocking the place, and then you got 3 mana to spare. That's really good. Although priest turn 3, you play this, turn 4, you whack a Velen's Chosen on it. I mean, that is like a 5/8, and then Jesus, that's actually ridiculously good. These cards are really quite nice. Hell, even as Shaman, Rockbiter it, trade with something, deal 3 damage, that's wonderful. In fact, talking of Shaman, Fiola Lightbane then, when you Rockbiter it, it goes to a 6/4, gains Divine Shield, it can trade up massively and then survive, and then you can do it again next turn. I kinda like that. These two cards are very solid, and we'll see play in a lot of decks. At least at the start, there'll be a lot of experimenting with them. Their baseline stats are good enough to be played, and both their effects are fantastic. Deal 3 damage to a random enemy is certainly more usable and probably superior, but any deck that will run one will probably run the other, just because they're nearly comparably good, and just very solid early game threats. I'm liking some lower cost legendaries being added, I really, really am. So, this is nice to see. 2 very good, solid cards that will make potentially some buffy decks happen, and I like that, because buffs aren't seen too much because of silence and how easy removal is, and I don't know, I feel like a world where we see Blessing of Kings, we see Mark of the Wild, we see lots of... hell, even as a Shaman, put Ancestral Spirit on this. You deal the damage, it comes back, you can do it again. I want to see games where people are using cards like that because of these, so they're exciting legendaries. Okay, so we have Gormok the Impale English. If you have at least 4 of the minions, deal 4 damage. Actual support for aggressive decks here then. You spam out your first 3 turns. This will probably find its way into Zoo. I would be surprised if it's not. Again, 4/4/4 is kind of okay. It's missing a health, but a freaking 4 damage Battle Cry for 4 mana, that's way better than a Fire Elemental. This is pretty good. If you can flood the board, which Zoo can really do, this is a solid 4-drop. It's nothing crazy, but it is a very, very just solid card to have in your deck if you're going to be playing a lot of minions early. I kind of like this. I really, really do. Alright, next up we got the Skeleton Knight. Death Rattle, reveal a minion in his deck, and the Joust. So, basically, you play this, it dies, you win, back to your hand, you play it, it dies, you win, back to your hand. It's kind of infinite value in that sense. And 6 mana 7/4 is not great, but when you look at it, the fact that you can't really lose this card, assuming you keep winning jousts, that's not bad. And if the meta gets super slow control late game, Skeleton Knights are going to be a big deal. You're going to need to silence it. You're never going to have to stop killing this 7/4. So while I think it's inherently weak because stats are terrible and you can't rely on the Joust, it does have the potential to be a nightmare for your opponent. So I kind of like it flavor-wise. I do. I think super late game, you only got a few cards in your deck, maybe only 1 minion left, and it's like an 8-cost Ragnaros. So this guy keeps winning the Joust and you keep getting Skeleton Knight. I think that could be a lot of fun and quite difficult for your opponent to deal with. So not inherently strong, but it does have a lot of potential there. Alright, we got Druid of the Saber. Choose 1 charge or stealth. What can I say? It's just a nice card. You either get a Gilblin Stalker for 2/3, and if it transforms into a beast, which it feels like it would, because all the druids of the something transform into beasts, then this is going to support Beast Druid even more, which is nice. You either get a Bluegill Warrior or a Giblin Stalker with the beast tag. Both cards are fine, it's useful, it's nice having the utility. I think this card will see play. I mean, the only disadvantage this card has is it's competing with the next card I'm going to talk about for the 2-mana slot, so we will see. But, you know, in a vacuum, this card is not bad at all. It's not crazy strong, but it's certainly not weak. You'd never not be happy to have this on turn 2, I think. And in Arena, I think this is going to be a very solid 2-drop to pick up. I really, really do. So, I honestly really like this card. I think it's just nice for druids to have. So we have Darnassus Aspirant. This card is ridiculous. It's just brilliant. It's just absolutely fantastic and will most likely see play in every druid deck. At least a lot of them, to be fair. I shouldn't go bold as to every. Gain a mana crystal, lose it when it dies. Fine. I mean, you play it on turn 2, turn 3 you play a shredder, and then it dies, and so what? You're back on curve. You've not lost anything for it dying. You just had a temporary gain. Your opponent either wastes their turn 2 or 3 removing this, or they play a minion and give you a turn of an extra mana. It's just a very, very solid early game druid drop, and it's good. It's exciting for druid players. It really, really is. Also, imagine if your opponent gets this out of Shredder, all they have is the Death Rattle Loser mana crystal, which I think is quite an amusing dud to get out of your piloted Shredder, so that's always nice. Maybe it'll encourage slightly less piloted Shredder play, because it is getting absolutely ridiculous. And what else is good is this card might promote stuff like I was saying, Mark of the Wild. Because turn 2, Darnassus Aspirant. Turn 3, Mark of the Wild. You got a 4/5 with Taunt on turn 3. That is fine. If they silence the buff away, they silence the Death Rattle away. Guess what? You've now gained a 2/3 with the inbuilt Wild Growth. That is bonkers, so this card is great. Next up, Savage Combatant, a 5/4 beast, give your hero +2 attack this turn when you use your hero power, so you get to hit things for a Fiery War Axe of damage for your hero power. That's just fine. Stats are solid, 4/5 is a bit better, but 5/4 is not bad. It's a strictly better Lost Tall Strider, but it is a class card, so it's allowed to be, and it's a beast, so it might encourage some snakes, beast druids. So, yeah, druids should be pretty happy so far. Very good cards. And now we have the druid legendary Aviana, the queen of the harpies. Maybe a demigod? I can't actually remember, but either way, 5/5 for 9, which is obviously horrific, but then your minions cost 1. Now, initially, it's easy to be like, oh my god, that is incredible, what the hell is going on? But this card is so slow. You need to play this and then have another minion ready to play that you've not played before this, which means you need to get to turn 9 with a stable board state and not be losing too hard that you can afford to whack down a 5/5 and then a free, say, Ragnaros, instead of just the Ragnaros. Is the extra 5/5 worth it? Probably, yes, and of course this ridiculous stuff, play this, innovate, Sneeds, Ragnaros, Kel'Thuzad, boom! That's kind of insane. You play this Thaurissan, all your cards cost 0, yep, pretty good. The ultimate dream scenarios with this card are incredible. But the average scenario is you play it on turn 10 with another big impact play, which is not bad. If the meta goes as slow as I'm hoping, this card will be great. But even if it's medium speed, you're going to have a lot of time playing this. Granted, if you get this and get a big combo off and your opponent doesn't kill you next turn, you've probably won. So this card is very interesting. It's either going to do nothing for you and be a terribly overcosted 5/5, or it's basically going to win the game hard. I kinda like that. Okay, a new hunter card, Brave Archer. It literally looks like Brave, doesn't it? I mean, I have to imagine that's deliberate, so that's kind of neat. A nice little reference there. And Inspire, if your hand is empty, deal 2 damage to enemy hero. So you play this, you have nothing in your hand, your hero power becomes deal 4 damage to the enemy hero. That's ridiculous. But then again, that's a very specific scenario where this is going to be the last card in your hand. And To be fair, it is an extra 1 mana drop, which means you can more consistently definitely play something on turn 1, so it has that going for it, but I think you'll get its Inspire effect once in a blue moon, so it's effectively just a 1 mana 2/1, which isn't great. So, honestly, it sounds like it's the most ridiculous facey thing ever, but I don't think it's that bad at all. I think you are going to be fine with that card. So, next up, we've had 2 new mage cards. First up, the Spellslinger. 3 mana, 3/4. So, firstly, brilliant stats, fantastic. Battle Cry, add a random spell to each player's hand. This is fun. I like this. And I don't think it's too much of a negative to give your opponent a random spell that it won't be played. I think this will see a lot of experimentation and maybe at least a copy of it in a lot of mage decks, because A, the mage can choose when the random spell happens, and B, I think a mage can utilize a random spell more. It might even promote some counterspell being played, maybe even some more secrets with the Kirin Tor. I like this. It's a good card, good stats, a little bit of random fun, and I like symmetrical effects like this. I do. I think with some clever usage of it, the mage can get a lot of value out of Spellslinger. Obviously, there'll be times where you get a Sacrificial Pact and your opponent gets Pyroblast, but you can't look at extreme situations. On average, I think this will do pretty well for you. Next up then, 5 mana, Flame Lance, deal 8 damage to a minion. Why does this exist? This card is so bad. I mean, why? Why? Fireball is 4 mana, deal 6 damage. That's not even being played. That Fireball is not being played that much. And that can target face. Who would use Flame Lance? Unless the meta is so slow and controlly with big minions that you need X removal on top of 2 sheeps. This is not going to see play. I mean, it's okay in Arena because it's slower and you have time to use a 5 mana removal, but I mean, it's worse than Assassinate. It's not good. I mean, it looks cool. I hope the effect is actually a Flaming Lance, because that would be badass, but it's just not necessary in the mage's arsenal. Why would you play this over a Polymorph? Yeah, the Polymorph leaves a 1/1, but it's a mana cheaper, and it gets rid of Death Rattles for you. It just... Unless you are playing 2 copies of this on top of 2 Polymorphs, on top of 2 Fireballs, because you need that crazy removal, it's just bad. It's not a good card. Hell, this could be deal 20 damage to a minion, and it would still not really see that much play. It needs to be cheaper for this to be worth it, like 4 mana, hell, even 3 mana. 3 mana is kind of like, yep, we're playing 2 of it, it's not broken, but we're definitely playing it in every mage deck. 4 mana is probably a sensible amount to make it a meaningful choice over Fireball. Because right now, that card is not good. You do not want to be playing 5 mana to remove something with 4-5 health. Then you want to be playing a solid 5-drop. You really don't. So, yeah. Finally then, some Paladin cards. The Argent Lance. We got a Joust, and then you get a 2-free weapon. Solid. 2/2 is kind of okay as well. It's Glaivezuka without the damage. It's an early game weapon for Paladin. They kind of struggle with removal early game. This will help them with that. And if you can use it 3 times, it takes you all the way to True Silver, and that's fantastic by itself. It's just a good, solid weapon. Maybe having 2 attack might not be good, because the meta is kind of looking to shift towards 2/3s over 3/2s, but against a more aggressive deck with 1 to 2 health minions, this is going to help out Paladin a lot. As is the next card, Tuskar Jouster. If you win the Joust, you get 7 health, and it's a 5/5 for 5, which is fine. This card is nuts. This card is absolutely brilliant. If you win this Joust, you get a heal bot, but with extra 4 stats, and that is redonkulous. I think this card will see play at least 1 copy of in damn near every Control Paladin. I just think it's incredibly solid. That is a lot of health to restore, especially attached to a meaty Tuskar Turtle combo there. I really do. I like this card. Maybe 2 of them is too slow, but the main advantage of this is it lets a Paladin replace heal bot. Not that they really get used that much, but it's just effectively mostly a better heal bot. Yes, it has to win the Joust, but if you're playing this, you're playing a slow, heavy costed deck, so, you know, you got a good chance of that happening. I do like this card. And then the Paladin Legendary, everybody! Eredrick the Pure! It's a free 7 for 7 that comes with a follow the rules on everything on your opponent's board. If your opponent's board is like got 5 minions on it, 6, which it might do in a slow control game by turn 7, and you bust this out, you are gonna dominate the board, because they have to get rid of these creatures now that are effectively useless. Yes, 3 for 7's really inherently weak, attack-wise, but you don't really care, because this is going to tank everything up when you've now made everything one attack, and you can't waste silences on your own creatures like that. I think this is really good, definitely better than Bolvar, and I think this will see a lot of play. It's just a nice utility card that will really help Paladins dominate the board. It really, really will. Moving on then to Rogue's Shadowpan Cavalry. A combo plus free attack, 5 mana. So, I mean, let's look at the ideal. Half the time you have coin, let's say you somehow have it on turn 4, coin, turn 4, 6, 7. Pretty good, okay, a cheaper early Boulder Fist Ogre. But the thing is, that's not inherently that brilliant. And to be fair, if cards like this become popular, then maybe we'll see Flame Lamps. But even so, I mean, just that's being optimistic here. But this card, I mean, it's encouraging a more slower mid-rangey rogue, because it is great stats for the cost if you can combo it, but there's not that many combo setups for this. You use your backstabs early for control. You don't want to prep just randomly for it. If a rogue gets another cheap spell, then maybe Shadowpan Cavalry will come into play. It's one of those cards that's really good in a vacuum, but when you look at it in reality and how it would sit in a deck, it's not going to work out enough of the time, which is a shame, because I really like the card itself. I think Pandaren are awesome, and I don't know, I think it entirely depends on what Rogue's other revealed cards end up as to whether this sees play. It's definitely good enough to, it just needs other cards that can support it a bit better to actually make it happen, because you can't rely on the coin when you're trying to be competitive, and hell, you'll probably be using the coin on a turn 2 SI7 or some other combo earlier on. So it's in dream scenario, Shadowpan Cavalry is great, but in average scenario, you're going to be playing an expensive 3/7, which isn't that good. Okay, a new rogue card, Burgle! It's about time rogues started stealing things. 3 mana, add 2 random class cards to your hand from your opponent's class. It's like a Thought Steal, but you're not restricted to your opponent's deck, which makes it about as good as Thought Steal, because it means you're not restricted to their good cards they've put in their deck, but you might get situationally better cards from the class in general, like a Sacrificial Pact against a demon-based Warlock, which they wouldn't have in the deck themselves. I think it's a lot of fun, I think it'll be experimented with, and it has the potential to add even more tools to the Rogue's arsenal, and let them survive on having less card draw for longer, because you're now generating more cards from your opponent. It's like a 3 mana Deathwing effect, but I guess it could also get minions, so it's a lot better, especially if you get 2 very solid minions. Hell, you could get your opponent's class legendaries from this, so I think this deck actually might find its way into a lot of rogues, because the potential upsides are massive. If the game goes late and is slow enough, and you can get full value out of stuff you've pulled off this, that is insane, it really is. It won't see play if the meta remains too fast, but if it doesn't, Burgle's gonna be pretty good. And then we have the rogue legendary Anubarak, the undead leader of the Nerubians, a big important lore figure, and he's an 8/4 for 9, which again is terrible stats. However, when he dies, he goes back to your hand and summons the 4/4 Nerubian, the same one out of the egg, because he is, of course, a Nerubian, a Crypt Lord, and that makes him ridiculous. You either silence him, or you deal with him every single turn for the rest of the game from turn 9. That's not bad, is it? That's okay. Granted, it's very slow, and if he does get silenced, it's the biggest waste of 9 mana you've ever seen. But again, as with Aviana that I talked about, if the meta is super slow, this card, incredible. If it's even slightly fast, you're not gonna get much value out of it, but the potential is unreal. Also, if you get this in Arena and manage to play it, you've basically won the game. It's ridiculous. So, I do like this, both of the Rogue and Druid legendaries. Very, very much you either just win with it or it does nothing really that much for you. And I kind of like that as a design choice. I do. So next up we have 2 more Warlock cards. One of them, Demon Fuse. Let's have a look at Demon Fuse. This card is so bad. This card is so terrible. Alright, so obviously you got to compare it to Demon Fire, which is deal 2 damage or give a demon +2/+2. That at least has the flexibility to be removal. So for an extra +1/+1, you give your opponent a mana crystal. Are you insane? This card is terrible. And this is the thing. Warlocks have the best hero power, which means they're always going to get, on average, weak cards added to them, because it's very easy to tip Warlock over the edge and make them ridiculous, but this is just a joke of a card. I cannot see a world where this is going to be played, because let's say the ideal, the dream. You play a Voidwalker or Flame Imp on turn 1. Turn 2, you Demon Fire that bad boy. You've got yourself a 4/5 Voidwalker Taunt on turn 2. You've got yourself a 6/5 Flame Imp on turn 2. Yeah, that's impressive, but your opponent is now on turn 4 or 3, and they've now got ahead of you on their mana. They remove it, they silence it, they do something to it, and then for the rest of the game, you were at a massive disadvantage. It's just not worth it in any way, shape, or form. It really is not. And this doesn't make sense to me. This card should be, give a demon +3/+3, Death Rattle, give your opponent a mana crystal. That way, you know, it's actually a fuse. Also, if they silence the buff away, they silence their free mana crystal. It encourages them to deal with it in a less optimum way. It makes an interesting card, it's not overpowered. This is just a freaking joke. It is terrible. It will not be played. That is just terrible. Though, fortunately, the other Warlock card is Wrathguard, and this, however, is pretty damn good. 2 mana for free. Granted, a 3/4 would be better, but you're not going to complain at 4/3 for 2. That is valuable stats. It's Succubus, and with a much better drawback. Whenever this minion takes damage, also deal an amount to your hero. This is neat, because yes, you will have situations where a warrior shield slams your Wrathguard for 20 and you just lose. But the thing is, if you play this on curve on turn 2, you're never going to feel the punishment more than maybe a Flame Imp's worth of damage. At most, 4/5 is what you're going to be taking. And honestly, that's worth it, because this is a powerful 2-drop. Yes, it also does die to 2 drops, but that's not really a big deal. 2 of these will sit very nicely in Zoo, because your health, after all, is a resource. Now, granted, if this was 3/4, it would be broken strong. However, at 4/3, I just think it's a very solid, strong 2-drop, and there will be a lot of experimentation with this card. I think it might become a staple in quite a few decks. It's just a really, really strong card. Alright, next up then, we got Ancestral Knowledge for Shaman. We get a draw card, and it's kind of bad. Oh. 4 mana Arcane Intellect, you can't play it earlier, you basically skip a turn. I'm a little bit sad, but at the same time, it might encourage Lava Shock being played a bit more, which is good. And also, in the late game, say you're on 10 mana, you play this, you go to 8, you get 2 cards, you can probably play them, it's okay. I think this might be a one-of in a Control-y Shaman. I certainly will be experimenting it, but I feel like it could be either 2 cost 1 overload, make it just a different costed Arcane Intellect, or a 1 mana cost 2 overload. I just think the 4's a little bit too much, but I also think it's still kind of playable. And the thing is, it's dangerous giving Shaman card draw, because they're such a combo-y potential class, that the only reason they're not insane is because they are restricted by the cards that they can draw. So I see why it is 4. But it is a little bit disappointing. And that said, I will be playing it. I will. I want to see how that works. And then, finally, 2 warrior cards, everybody. We got Bash. Deal 3 damage, gain 3 armor. Really good, solid, early game removal. It's a spell, gives you some spell synergies potential, and enables you to use spell power a little bit early on if you should have it. May spawn a kind of different type of warrior. Enables you to use shield slam a lot earlier without wasting a shield block, as well as killing. So, I mean, it's just a good card. It's not crazy, it's not ridiculous, it's just good, and warrior will play Bash. And then we have Bolster, finally. Give your taunt minions +2/+2. This is interesting. So along with King's Defender, I feel like they're giving Warrior a very much tanky makeover. They want them to run taunts, they want them to be a wall class even more than their hero power already allows them to be. And the thing is, if you have a few taunts and you give them all +2/+2, that's pretty good value for a 2-mana card, it really is. So I think Taunt Warrior could be fun, and this card will certainly see play in it if it's good enough. If not, probably will never see play, but I do like the idea of experimenting with a Taunt Warrior. So there you go, guys. We are caught up on all of the cards. I will return when a few more have been released, and maybe I'll do it in smaller chunks in the future. I didn't expect such a sudden surge of cards, I will admit. So for now, my name has been Rage. Let me know what you guys think. Any you like, any you don't. Like if you enjoyed this, and subscribe for more. Oh, goodbye.